for joining us this afternoon. I know it's always a little bit tricky, these sort of things, aren't they? And hopefully we've got over some of the trickiness around delivering this sort of presentation over Zoom as well. So hopefully everything's going to work out, but please forgive me if there are a couple of technical issues that we stumble into as we go through. This has been completely revamped so that we can do it on an online platform. Unfortunately, because we're a little bit limited for time today, a couple of bits have had to be removed from the presentation. So it's not the full one that I would ordinarily deliver to business, but you're going to get pretty much the most pertinent stuff that we can talk about. So if you could just bear that in mind as we go through the presentation. I have no doubt if things fail to work, you will be sending messages pretty quick through to Tracy. We'll try and resolve them as we're going on. So as we mentioned, my name is Neil. I work with the Surrey and Sussex cybercrime unit, and I've been involved in this sort of business for many years. In fact, I started my computer science interest back in 1980s, the mid 1980s. I'm rather hoping that there are going to be some people who join this webinar who remember the century that existed before this one. Unfortunately, a lot of places that I go nowadays, people don't seem to think there was anything that happened before the year 2000. But there was, and that's when I was around, and that's kind of where I started off my business. If there is anybody who remembers the 1980s, you might remember that it was around about the time that the Duke of Edinburgh had his email address hacked. And that, amongst a bunch of other stuff, gave rise to the Computer Misuse Act of 1990. For the record, that wasn't me. But since then, I've been doing quite a lot of stuff around computers, coding for a variety of organizations and agencies. Now I kind of deliver sort of training, cybersecurity training, that sort of thing to businesses, individuals, anybody who is likely to benefit from it. So I hope you find this interesting. At the end of the webinar, I will make sure that I package this presentation up, send it over to Tracy so she can send it out to everybody. There's no need to make any notes. Hopefully you'll get that a little bit later on this afternoon. And in exchange for that, I'd be really grateful if you could just pass some comments or feedback around the content of the presentation, really just so that we know whether or not it's suitable for this sort of platform. As I say, it's the first one that we've done of this type. So I'd be very grateful if you could put some comments in a feedback box. There is a link at the end of the presentation that you can use and will obviously come in the email. The good thing is that if I get some half reasonable feedback, I might be going back here on holiday. And if not, it may well be the van for me again. Anyway, let's kick off. I really don't like dealing with statistics. Number one, because they're very rarely accurate, and I think there is a famous phrase around statistics, so I'm not going to bore you with a huge amount of statistics. One thing I can say, though, is that there is some interesting trends around what's going on in the cyber world, particularly in relation to the coronavirus pandemic. This is pretty anecdotal. I don't have these figures written down anywhere. This is from speaking to colleagues of mine, both within law enforcement and outside of law enforcement. What we can see is that since the start of this pandemic, taking figures from around about January, we saw quite a significant decline, almost 30% of reporting through action fraud. And then it slowly picked up again through March and April, and we're back to sort of usual levels now. Now, I do caveat that this is reporting through to police, through the action fraud side of business. Regrettably, that doesn't give us a huge amount of information about business compromise and business cyber attacks. The orange bars represent what I suspect to be the case from speaking to colleagues in the private sector. And what we've seen is a steady increase in detections of cyber criminality around the business workplace. What I would say is that a lot of this is actually being caught at the source of your IT, i.e. this is being caught by your IT providers. They might be phishing emails that's being captured within phishing filters, but in essence, it's been a steady increase from January through to April. As I say, anecdotal figures, but it gives you a picture, I think, of what we're actually looking at. there are a lot of problems around business reporting of cybercrime for a variety of reasons, reputational damage, all that sort of thing comes into play here. So the figures aren't as accurate as I would like them to be. Nevertheless, the threat and risk remains the same. We have those state actors, the Chinese, the Russians, the North Koreans, the Iranians, they're all looking to try and get into our system. I've included the Daesh flag down there because although we don't see a huge amount of terrorist activity around cyber attacks these days, I have no doubt they're going to come. They're going to be working out that delivering ransomware is a really good way of financing ideology. So I rather suspect that's on the horizon. We got hacktivists, people who are hacking for a living, those people who just don't like somebody, so they go in and try and hack their systems. We saw a big increase following the arrest of Julian Assange and that sort of area. They are very skilled, and a lot of the time they're actually working with those state actors to try and get into other countries' infrastructure, national infrastructure, that sort of thing. We've got espionage. We've got serious organized crime groups, a real problem for us at the moment. Right on the end there in green, we've got what we call script kiddies, which are the youngsters that are actually committing cybercrime, probably just for fun, but I suppose also for making a bit of money. The interesting thing about those script kiddies is that it brings the average age of a cyber criminal down to 17 years old, as opposed to the more traditional 28 years old of a standard criminal. So a huge amount of damage being done by all of those people. What we also have at the moment is an additional risk, and that is the amount of people who are working at home. And this brings with it a bunch of problems which never were thought to be things that businesses really need to consider. We've got the use of our own devices. We've got people working on IT infrastructure that's not been audited, insecure networking, business data on personal devices. All of this might be leading to potential compromise of data, exfiltration of data, personal data that could give rise to issues with GDPR. And it's fair to say that GDPR hasn't gone away as a result of this pandemic. Unfortunately, businesses just need to be aware of all of these issues that are going on whilst their staff are working at home, because they could have a problem for businesses in due course if there are issues around it. So it's certainly worthwhile considering. Now, there are a number of things that I usually talk to businesses about to shore up their defenses, but it's fair to say that within my line of work, the vast majority of cyber attacks happen in very similar ways. The first one is all to do with passwords and authentication. The vast majority of jobs that we see, you can trace back pretty much the fact that there was an insecure password, there was a weak password. And at this particular time, if I was standing in front of an audience, I would be asking them a couple of questions about the strength of their passwords. So since I can't do that on a webinar, what I'm going to say is that if you have a password of less than 13 characters, you probably need to be a little bit concerned. If you have a password that consists of a single word, you probably need to be a little bit concerned. Likewise, there are a number of different things that hopefully we'll cover during the course of this little section of passwords, and it'll hopefully make a bit more sense in due course. The photo on the front of the slide shows a bicycle lock. There was a reason for that, and the reason for that was that my son went to university a couple of years ago to take his bicycle. I said to him, your bicycle is in the garage, the lock is in the garage, it is unlocked. Make sure that you record the number of the lock before you lock it up. And in true form, 10 minutes later, he came out with a look on his face, wondering what the number was. It was a beautiful day, so we spent the next couple of hours trying to crack the lock, i.e. we started on 0000, 0001, 0002, etc., all the way through until we cracked the lock to 4,965 or something like that. But the point of telling you the story is this is what you might have heard called a brute force attack before. Now, brute forcing pretty much is a way that you use every possible combination to actually crack a code or a password or a bicycle lock or whatever the case may be. Now, the speed of computers has really contributed to this. And it's fair to say that you need to take some thought about how to create your password. Now, if we are cracking a computer password, things are a little bit different because we can use up to 94, roughly 94 characters. Those are the characters up there on the top 2 lines of this slide. It makes it significantly more difficult to crack a password. And just by way of explanation, the next section of the slide deals with how many combinations you might have for a password of a particular length. So as you can see there, a 1-letter password, you would have 94 to the power of 1 combination. 2-letter password, 94 to the power of 2, or 8,836 combinations, and so on and so forth. The numbers get bigger and bigger until you get to the bottom there where it says 8-letter passwords, and I only stopped at 8-letter passwords because I ran out of space on the slide. But in essence, you have 94 to the power of 8 combinations, which is a lot of combinations, as you can see from that number down the bottom. Now, the problem is that number might look quite big to us. It is quite a big number to us, but in computing terms, it's relatively small. And the power of computers now means that 8-letter passwords can be cracked pretty easily. I've seen statements suggesting they can be done in a matter of seconds, matter of minutes, whichever way you look at it. 8-letter passwords, no matter how complex they are ripe for cracking. So it's worthwhile considering that as we go through this little section. So we're going to talk a little bit about passwords. We're going to have a play with some passwords. Just before we do that, it might be sensible to think about what passwords actually are and how they work. So take an example that I have an account with Amazon. When I create that account, I'm requested to put a username and a password in. So I type my username, I type my password. That password then goes off to Amazon and they apply a bunch of algorithms to it and create what's called a hash of that password, which they store in their database. Now, when I come back to go shopping on Amazon, I'm required to put in my username. I put in my password. When it gets to Amazon, they apply those same algorithms to it. And as long as the hashes match, happy days, I'm shopping on Amazon. If they don't match, it's please can you try again. Now, this is a little password hacking demonstration tool that I wrote just to try and demonstrate this. This is really rudimentary. You're never going to find password hashes like this anywhere, but it gives you a good idea of how this sort of thing works. So in this box here, if we type in a password, as you can see, there's a password that's regularly used these days still. And what you get when you type that in is a hash here in this hash box. And as you can see, there's just a long list of numbers and letters that represents the hash of this password. And these are pretty unique because actually if I change the P to a capital P, you can see that that hash completely changes. Now these hashes are one way. They are impossible to reverse. So they are, you would think, relatively secure. But in the same way as that bicycle lock could be cracked by trying every possible combination, so we can do very similar things with passwords. Now my computer here is unfortunately a law enforcement computer. It's not the speediest computer in the book, so we have to scale things down a little bit. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a password of, say, quote and you, or something similar to that. As you can see, there is the hash. We're going to try and brute force this. And hopefully in this box here, you'll see exactly what it's doing. So if I click brute force, you can see exactly what it's doing. It's starting off with 1-letter passwords, then it's moved on to 2-letter passwords, and it's pretty much just going through every possible combination to try and crack the password. Now, when it applies the algorithm and gets the same hash as this, we're pretty much going to crack this password. As you can see there, we've moved on to 3 characters now. I'm just going to hide the values here to try and speed this up a little bit. And before we know it, we've actually cracked the password. So this is a brute force cracking. We're trying every combination. And on a fast computer, this could probably be done relatively quickly for passwords up to 8 letters long. So short passwords, regrettably, if you have them, it's really time to change them. So a lot of people will think, well, that's no problem. We can get a bit of a longer password, and that should do the trick. So let's just use our password, which is pretty common, of password. Lots of people still use this. What we can do with this is we can perform what's called a dictionary attack. A dictionary attack is very similar to a brute force attack, but what it does is it just forces using words in a dictionary. So just scroll through all those words, apply that algorithm to it, and if it gets the hash, it's going to crack the password. So in this particular case, I think I have a password of a dictionary of around about 1 million passwords, and here it is in here. So we'll have a look at dictionary.txt, and as you can see, we cracked the password in 4 milliseconds. So unfortunately, as we would expect, password isn't a particularly good password. Even on this system, which is very rudimentary, very slow, we've cracked it in 4 milliseconds. Likewise, if you put a couple of numbers after it, the likelihood is you're going to crack it equally quickly. So there are a number of ways that you can do this. The fact is, if your password is in the dictionary that is being used, the likelihood is it's going to be cracked at some point in time. I'll just leave this running for a couple of seconds, see where this happens. This is a town out of the blue. I don't know whether there's any Southampton supporters there, but this is the sort of thing that you might find being used for passwords, you know, where you were born, where you went to school, where your mum and dad live, your girlfriend lives, or whatever the case may be. I'll just give this a couple more seconds, see if it finds it. If it's in the database or in the listing of passwords, it will eventually get to it. But I'm not going to leave it any more than another 10 seconds. As I say, this is a bit of a slow computer, so I might not find something like that. Let's knock that one on the head. We could leave it running for a little bit and try and crack that if we wanted to. So the next thing that we could probably do is to start obfuscating our passwords with symbols and letters and that sort of thing. Now, that is a lot better. It's going to make your password a lot stronger. But if it still consists of roughly one word, you still have a problem with this. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to use a word of Boise. I don't know whether anybody knows where Boise is. It's the state capital of Idaho in the US. And I use it for no other reason that each one of those characters could be represented by a similar number or symbol or whatever the case may be. So for example, we could change the B to an 8. We could change the S to a 5, and we could change the E to a 3. Ordinarily, if I had you all in a room, I would be asking you to choose this for me, but as it happens, you're not here, so I'm going to do it on your behalf. And we can perform a slightly different dictionary attack, which will look a bit like this. And in 26 milliseconds, even though we've changed a load of the letters for numbers or symbols, we can crack that just as well. So we've got a slight problem. We can't use short passwords. We can't use long passwords. We can't use short passwords with words, with symbols and numbers and that sort of thing. So how do we actually get around this real big password issue? Now, I probably wouldn't be doing any of this. Just have a very quick look at this video and you can see how easy it is to get some passwords.
By asking them to tell us their password, and this is how that went.
We're talking about cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Chihuahua Papillon.
And what's its name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where'd you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School.
Oh, when did you graduate?
In 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. Have you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie.
Mm-hmm.
So like a password of yours would be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1?
Like my birthday.
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th.
Oh, nice. And what year were you born?
95.
Oh, great.
Mm-hmm.
So Jolie 6 $12.95.
Yes.
Got it.
So you mean to give my password right now? No, I cannot do that.
But we all want to know what it is so we can tell you if it's strong or not.
Oh my goodness. Let me think. Okay, one is Tel Aviv. Yeah. 468. And then Israel. It's only 3, but it's, you know, it's for me it's strong enough.
Ireland, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Gemma. 1, 2, 3. Spelled Gemma.
Well, most of them are Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Like
So
what?
like
What's a good Italian password?
my grandma's name,
What's your grandma's name?
Maria.
Maria. So Maria is your password?
Oh yeah, now you know my password. Oh yeah.
Turn the camera out on a
So there you go. There's quite a couple of easier ways than sitting there trying to crack everybody's passwords. And the amount of times that I've gone into businesses to give them presentations such as this, and you walk past a computer and you see that sort of post-it note sitting next to somebody's computer, yeah, it happens a lot. So certainly in terms of your credentials and your authentication, you really need to keep this secret. These have to be removed, and you certainly want to make sure that your passwords are kept to yourself. That's for definite. So how do we make a good password? Well, the key thing is not to have social media content, your mum's maiden name, dates and places of birth, all that stuff that we used to have in our passwords all the time. That's a no-no, because people can probably find that out about you and build particular dictionaries that contain just for you. What we can do, though, is we can have pre-random words. This will make your password, or should make your password, longer than 12 characters long. And if we include characters and numbers and a couple of symbols and that sort of thing, it's going to make it really, really difficult for anybody to crack. And certainly what we want to do is to have a separate password for our email. The reason being is that if anything ever goes wrong, our email is going to be the way that we actually try and sort it out. And for people who've had their email compromised, it is a real, real problem and causes no end of headaches. Also, we should be using different passwords for different accounts. If you're anything like me, that causes a bit of a problem because I struggle to remember one password, never mind many. The reason for this is that hackers, if they find that they're successful with one combination of your username and password, they will automatically try it on tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands even, of other websites to see whether or not they can get into your account. And what we find regularly is that somebody will phone us up to say that they've had their LinkedIn compromised, and before you know, within 24 hours, all of a sudden, all their social media accounts are compromised because they've used the same or very similar passwords for all those online accounts. And certainly, different passwords for work. They should be completely different from what you use at home. And there you have a way of creating some strong passwords. Urban Palm Mountain, probably the weakest out of the 3. This is a little bit more, a little stronger with a couple of numbers in there, and even stronger still with the symbols within it as well. And for all of those of you who've actually screen dumped this, that is not my Amazon password, just for information. So what else can we use? If we need to have separate passwords for all our accounts, we've got a slight problem. And this is where password managers are really the key, because password managers are software that you can have sitting on your computer that will do exactly this. They will manage your passwords. You can have hundreds of accounts registered in your password manager. They can all have almost impossible to crack passwords. The problem with a password manager is you really need to have a secure way of getting into it. So the password to get into your password manager needs to be really strong, and definitely needs to be that 3 random words, definitely longer than 12 characters, and certainly using multiple characters, capital letters, zeros, and that sort of thing. But password managers nowadays are excellent bits of kit. They cover multiple devices, so you can have access to all your passwords on any of your devices. It's just a case of choosing the right one for you. Just do a Google search and you can find some of the key ones that are being reviewed at the moment. Bear in mind, there are some criminals who would love you to buy their password manager. Please don't fall for that. The next thing that you can think about doing is having a look at sites like haveibeenpwned.com. Now, haveibeenpwned.com will look at your username and determine whether or not there's been a breach involving your username and password in the past. So all you do is you put your email address or your username in there, click the pwned button, and it'll tell you whether or not it's been compromised. Compromises are happening really often nowadays. In fact, they are so commonplace that you don't even read about them in the news. The last one I saw being reported was GoDaddy last week, but in the last 12 months, we've had Marriott, we've had British Airways, we've had a host of really big companies that have lost data as a result of a cyber attack. If you fall victim to one of those, you can type your details in here. It'll tell you whether or not your details have been compromised, and actually it's just a good prompt to change your password to that particular account. You'll obviously get these details when this gets mailed out to you a little bit later on. And lastly, for security purposes, two-factor authentication is really the key. This is the thing that is going to secure your accounts as best as they can possibly be secured at the moment. Now, two-factor authentication is a mechanism whereby it doesn't rely on just something that you know, i.e. your username and password. If it sees, or the system sees, that there are some circumstantial differences between what it's used to and what you're trying to do, it will ask for a second factor of information. Now, more often than not, this is done by using your mobile phone through a one-time passcode, or maybe an authentication app. But the reality is, if you don't have the logon details and the device in your possession, you will fail to get into that account. Now, what this does is it stops people from managing to find out what your username and password is and then using that to get into your accounts. And certainly all the password managers will have two-factor authentication available. So you can almost guarantee that nobody is going to get into those accounts. And the good thing is, if you employ all of these different mechanisms for your password, you reduce vulnerability by well over 80%. And this isn't, for business purposes, it isn't just for your user passwords, it's for your services on your network. It's for all those applications that you got running at system level. All those passwords need to be the same. So it's a really good idea just to take these things into consideration. Great, so just in summary, yeah, use strong passwords. Definitely protect your email by using a separate password. For sure, get your staff to be using separate passwords for work. Use a password manager. Definitely consider turning on two-factor authentication, and obviously check for username and password compromises. So that pretty much deals with passwords. We're going to talk a little bit about phishing now. Now, phishing is another way that people are going to get your passwords, and phishing it's increased in sophistication. In fact, it increases in sophistication almost every day. Some of the emails that I see around phishing nowadays are so good, you would never recognize that they were phishing emails. And I'm sure all of you have received a bunch of phishing emails in the past. This is the definition of phishing. It's pretty much getting your personal information. I think it should be changed to include this because a lot of the phishing emails we're seeing are coming with those attachments that people want you to run so they can get access to your computers and the like. And it can come in any way, shape, or form. We're used to traditional emails, but it can come on WhatsApp messages, Facebook Messenger, it can come over the telephone. People could accost you outside of Waitrose, all for one purpose, to get your personal information. And obviously, if that includes your username and password, you run the risk of people being able to compromise you. And a lot of this will take into account some sort of social engineering. You probably all know what this is. This is a massive subject in itself. But in essence, we can pretty much get it down to a couple of things. This is going to be stuff that makes you think of doing something that you wouldn't ordinarily do, whether it's curiosity, whether it's because you've won something, a deadline. We've all seen those emails saying urgent, act now, 12 hours left, or whatever the case may be. Or it could even be the nasty boss, as you see in that fourth one over there. There's a whole realm of different ways that people are going to structure these emails to try and get you to do something that you don't want to do. And in particular, at the moment, we've got coronavirus and COVID-19. We've seen a lot of emails going out about this, trying to sell you stuff that's going to cure coronavirus, medical equipment where you'll put in an order and never see the stuff again, charity requirements, all sorts of stuff. certainly my message is, if you're getting any of this, refer to a legitimate source and find out what's going on. Now, in the business community, we're seeing a lot of different types of phishing, and the two that I want to talk about today is spear phishing and whaling. Now, these are very bespoke types of phishing, and they're directed at particular areas of an organization. And we see these a lot, and generally, in fact, I'm pretty sure that the latest statistics are that this sort of phishing is causing the biggest financial damage to companies in the UK at the moment. Spear phishing tends to be directed at an organizational section of a company. Whaling is generally directed towards the senior management and that sort of area. Very different kinds of attacks, but they are created in order to appeal to those sectors of that business. Now, it's relatively easy for criminals to do this. This is a hunter.io website where I can find out details about email addresses. So we just had a look at Microsoft.com here, and it tells me a whole load of Microsoft.com emails. If you've got a domain name for your company, I would just type in your domain name in here and get any emails that you find out about that. Just give me a good indication of how I'm going to target your organization with a phishing campaign. And hopefully Hunter will even tell me what department you're in, whether your support or management team, etc., etc. You know, I'm not saying this is going to be 100% accurate, but this is a really good starter for 10 if I wanted to target your organization. Subsequently, you could go to sites a little bit like this, where you can do some research around the individuals or those credentials that you found. There are some really good ones. Intel Techniques you have to pay for now, but to be fair, it's not a huge amount of money if you're a successful phisher. And indeed, there are free ones available if you so wish. But this will start giving you more information about those individuals that you want to target these emails toward. And unfortunately, a lot of us are leaving personal information and data in a variety of locations. Let's quick look at this video and show you how we did it.
Oh, hi, can I help?
Hot chocolate.
What's the name?
Joelle.
What was the name?
Alex.
Alex. There you go, Johnny.
Cheers.
If you like our Facebook page, we give you a free hot drink and a free pastry. We have a new like for Damien. We have a new like for Damien.
Hey, Carly, are you standing by?
Standing by. Hi there, can I help?
Yeah, just liked your Facebook page.
Okay, I'll search Facebook now. I'm searching Google. Have a phone number.
I've got his email address.
Okay, Carly, are you ready for information on Damien?
Yep, I am.
Mother's maiden name is he banks with.
Carly, this is the girl coming in now with the blue scarf.
What's her name? Nicholas.
Nicholas. His date of birth, 7th of May. She lives at 38A.
Just be a couple of seconds.
2 children at age 4 and 6. Previous address. She's got the photos.
Yeah, got it. Damien, age 26 and a fitness instructor.
How do you know that?
Brody goes to UCL. Martin went to South Thames College. Assistant psychologist at Great Ormond Street.
That is I don't understand.
Oh, pardon?
You know I'm a Christian as well.
Oh, yeah, we know everything about you, Martin.
Oh.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Anna from Russia.
So a couple of worried people there. The key message around that is obviously personal information. Definitely make sure you keep it personal. Obviously, within the business environment, we're going to be wanting to advertise a lot of our business stuff and who we are and that sort of thing. It's certainly worthwhile knowing what you've got online about yourself and your company, though, so that when you get these sort of phishing emails in, you can see exactly whether or not they contain real information or stuff that has just been taken off the internet. So here's a typical phishing email. I'm not going to dwell too much on this. I'm sure we've seen loads of these before. All sorts of problems with this one, timings, the grammatical errors. We've got some attachments in there that you probably wouldn't be clicking on. But in essence, it's just a case of having a look at these to see whether or not they look as though they're real or not. So here's a COVID-19 one that got sent to me the other day. These are going to be coming through thick and fast, and there's going to be a variety of different ones. Some are going to be pretty poor. This one's pretty poor. There will be others, though, that are pretty good, though. So it's certainly worthwhile remembering this, particularly if your business is doing anything around this sort of COVID-19 response. The other thing to remember about this is what we call spoofing. And spoofing is where people can send you emails purporting to be from somebody else and making it look as though they are that person. So, for example, this is one that I sent to myself. It looks as though it's come from Mickey Mouse. It looks as though it's come from Mickey@Disney.com. It's relatively simple to do, and it can contain links, it can contain attachments, all that sort of thing. All you need to do is hover over those to see where you're going to be going. Down here at the bottom left-hand side, it'll tell you. It's just to be aware of these. So if you, in your organization, wanted to target a particular department within your organization, you might find out who the boss is and just send everybody an email purporting to be from the boss. That might make it a little bit more likely that they're going to click on an attachment or a link within that email. Obviously, on a mobile device, you can do very similar things. You just press and hold the link, and you can see exactly where it's taking you. You just need to be a little bit careful with that because you're technically clicking the link, and you wouldn't want to take your finger off too quick and actually visit it. But you can see exactly what you can do on that. Now, one of the things that I've recently been talking to businesses about is Office, particularly Office 365. And Office comes with some huge benefits, but unfortunately, where there's benefits for us, there are also some risks. Now, Microsoft Office has a programming language that sits behind it. It's called Visual Basic for Applications. I'm not sure whether many people use this. Certainly in my experience from going around companies, not many people are aware of it. But this is an extraordinarily powerful bit of software that can do all sorts of funky stuff in your Office things. I'm sure it'll be touted as making business productivity easier and all the usual sort of stuff. The problem is, if it's good for us, it's excellent for the criminal. And what we're seeing a lot of nowadays is this sort of coding being included within attachments and malicious software. Now, how can you get onto your computer? Well, it's relatively simple. You can embed all this sort of code in a standard Office document. For example, this is an Excel document. If you get an Excel document from away from your network, you might find that it comes up with that yellow bar with an information marker saying you just need to be a little bit careful with this. It's come from outside of the network. You probably won't do too much damage if you click Enable Editing on this. But if you get one like this, it says that macros have been disabled, enable content. If you click enable content on this particular one, it will then launch the code in the background that can have access to all sorts of powerful functions. It can connect to the internet. It can run applications on your computer. It can do all sorts of stuff. So it's well worthwhile just being aware of these attachments, Office attachments when you get them, to make sure that you pay some good attention to these warnings that are coming in. These are standard Office warnings. So in terms of phishing, then, it's always a case of reading email carefully. Now, I get the fact that everybody's getting tons of emails. I'm probably going to rewrite this to say, if you're going to click on a link or you're going to launch an attachment, read the email carefully. It is vital. This is the way that most stuff is getting onto people's computers now. We need to educate staff around the dangers of phishing. We certainly want to encourage reporting and notification. All these emails you can send through to the National Cybersecurity Center, and they analyze all of them to try and take down some of these places that are doing this. Now, there are anti-spoofing controls that you can use within your infrastructure. Definitely, we don't want to be entering our credentials unless we're in the right place. Keeping up to date with what's going on. Certainly talk about this amongst your officers, amongst your groups. Certainly with working at home, make sure that you email everybody if you're getting targeted with these sort of emails. And probably most importantly is to check your email rules. This is the way that criminals will try and gain access or control a compromised email account by using an email rule. So it's definitely worthwhile familiarizing yourself with where they are and making sure that you are actually the author of them. And there is the email address. You'll obviously get this in the presentation that I send out later on. But all phishing email addresses are going to one place, and they're all being analyzed to get these services closed down. So that pretty much deals with phishing. Now, phishing, as we talked about right at the beginning, is designed to either get your personal data or to try and get you to install stuff on your computers. And as you can see here, malware comes in a whole variety of shapes and forms. Worms, viruses, Trojan horses, ransomware, spyware, rootkits. They're all designed pretty much to give you a pretty bad day. So you need to be really careful about what you're clicking on and what you're installing on your system. They can come from a variety of different sources. It's certainly worthwhile just to be aware of them. This is a port that is of significance to me because a huge amount of the jobs that I deal with have emanated from this particular port. This is the remote desktop port 3389, and unfortunately we're still seeing huge volumes of compromises over remote desktop connections. Now, some of you will be aware of this. I think a huge number of you are using some form of remote desktop connection software as we go through the coronavirus pandemic, but this is causing a significant problem. It does when we're not working from home, so you can imagine what it's like when people are working from home. Remote desktop connections are really useful because they enable you to access your networks from somewhere else. The problem is that it really needs to be absolutely secure. So those passwords, really important. Two-factor authentication, really important. All of that will help to reduce the potential of a compromise on your remote desktop connections. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of these are using port 3389. All of them will have a different way of interacting, but all of those credentials need to be as strong as any others. And certainly where you can employ two-factor authentication, it really should be employed. I think everybody is probably aware of some of the media around Zoom over the last month or so. They've done a great job in trying to restrict some of those issues, but you can see that wherever there is something that is going to be of benefit to a criminal, they will exploit it. So all of this remote networking activity just needs to be considered from a security perspective. Of course, what happens when we land up getting some of this ransomware or malware on our computers, we can have a big problem. This is the WannaCry ransomware. You may remember the WannaCry ransomware from 2017. This is a pretty typical example, really. You get a message like this popping up on your desktop asking you to pay some money in Bitcoin and that sort of thing, telling you how you can recover some files with perhaps a Bitcoin wallet or something like that. This is what hit the NHS back in 2017. And as you can see from the stats, they're pretty staggering. It caused a huge, huge problem, not least the human cost, never mind the global financial problems that caused as well. And those clocks over there on the right-hand side, that pretty much signifies the time that it was first identified somewhere in Eastern Europe, 24 minutes past 8, and the time the damage was done. Just over 2.5 hours. We had 300,000 victims worldwide, £2.3 billion cost to the global economy, and a huge amount of issues. These are happening all the time. In fact, they're so commonplace now, we don't even read about it in the news or in the papers anymore. So definitely something to keep clear about. There have been some really high-profile ransomwares in the last couple of years. There's MERS, they got hit, and they come in a variety of shapes and sizes, as you can probably see from those images there. This one I particularly like because it addresses you as hello, dear friend, as if you would be a dear friend or something like this would happen to your computers. But these are the sorts of things that you're likely to experience. Now, how do we get around this? Because this is a huge problem for business. And the key thing about this, number one, is to make sure those credentials are secure. But number two is to get antivirus software on your devices. Now, this isn't just your servers and your computers, the desktops at work. This is on all your devices. It's on your mobile devices. It's on your laptops. It's on your tablets. It's on your computers at work. It's really important to have antivirus software on all devices. A lot of the bespoke software that comes with the operating system, Defender, for example, in Windows, are really good. There is no reason to not to use that. A lot of companies will have a corporate account with one of the internet security providers. Whatever it is, it's just important to make sure that you have it, it's installed, and it's kept up to date. Certainly use your device security mechanism. So for all of those people working from home, yeah, use the fingerprints, use the face prints and all that sort of stuff to make sure that you can log on. These are really good now. The newer the operating system, the more they take security into consideration. So it's, you know, if you've got a new kit, generally it's going to come with a whole host of really good security mechanisms. And I would encourage you to use those. Keeping software and apps up to date, extremely important. This is where vulnerabilities in software is where companies find out that there is a problem or a security issue with their software. They will write a bit of software called a patch that you can install to clear up that vulnerability. There was an interesting one just recently with WhatsApp. Well, I say recently, about 6 months ago. The Israelis worked out a way of being able to activate your camera on WhatsApp without you knowing anything about it. Of course, that was a bit of it to do. WhatsApp immediately rewrote some code and delivered a patch for that app very quickly after that was notified. So these are all things that are going to help to secure your devices. I do get the fact that a lot of businesses have to have quite a regimental process in deploying patches to make sure it doesn't interfere with legacy software and other applications, but certainly it needs that consideration when you're moving through your stuff. Obviously, controlling access to removable media, making sure that people can't just plug in USB keys and CD-ROMs and that sort of thing, which can automatically launch software. Obviously, this will also have a bit of an impact around what level of access you want your people or your staff to have on your system. The higher the level of access, the more likely it is there's going to be damage caused if there's a problem. I'm not sure whether any of you are into dismantling your computers and your mobile phones, but obviously if you do, you can cause a problem with the security mechanisms around it. And yeah, this is what we were just talking about, admin user policies. Just consider who your admin users are and whether or not they need to be admin users when they're undertaking their day-to-day business. For example, if you've got a network administrator, there's no reason probably why they need to be an admin user for the vast majority of their time. Keep those admin accounts for when you're offline, installations, that sort of thing. And just be sensible about who has that administrative privilege over your system. And the last thing around this is backups. Unfortunately, there are still so many businesses that I go to where a suitable backup procedure isn't in place. This is really, really important. Your data needs to be backed up, and it needs to be backed up in a way that is going to be safe and secure, and you can have access to it relatively easily. And we advocate the use of cloud backups nowadays. The vital thing about backups is that once you've backed stuff up, it needs to be disconnected from the system. And a number of companies that I've been to in the recent past, where they have a really good backup regime, but the network attached storage or the external hard drive or whatever the case may be is left in the network. And what happens is that if you get ransomware, the ransomware has the ability of traversing network connections and USB connections and all that sort of thing. So ransomware is the desktop computers, then moves along the network, goes and finds the backups, and ransomware as well. We have a saying called air gapping in the trade. It's important to make sure that everything is disconnected after your backup has been done to secure and make sure that your data is secure. So something definitely worthwhile. This should be in such a form that you can get your business up and running in the event of a disaster. Backups are a real critical part of this process. So just touching very quickly on management. One of the things that I like to mention to companies, and I know that each company is different, but these sort of documents can go a long way to make sure that you've got things under control. A cybersecurity policy enables your staff to understand their obligations and what you as the manager, the director, or whoever it is in charge of those companies can reasonably expect to be the case when you're managing the risk around IT in your company. Business continuity, how quick do you have to be up and running in the event of a disaster? If you've got 48 hours before you need to be up and running, your plan, your incident response plan needs to be of such a type that you can actually get up and running within that 48-hour period. And by having all this written down, by having a policy in place so that you can actually see exactly what you need to do, sometimes is a really good idea so that you can make sure that a sequence of events is followed following a disaster that can get you back up and running as soon as possible. Now, some of these will even take into account things that you might do in terms of transaction limits or account policies. For example, if you are happy to lose £2,000 or a maximum of £2,000, well, then you probably wouldn't need to do any checks around invoices or requests for payment. However, a lot of business email compromises results in this sort of problem. If you're not prepared to accept that, then you really need a sort of transaction policy around the fact that if you get an invoice, then a phone call goes into that person who's requesting the money to ensure that there hasn't been an issue in that email coming to you and the invoice has been tampered with and you're about to pay a criminal. All things that you can consider around your documentation around how you manage IT. And Cyber Essentials, that's a really good little program that's run by the government that goes some way to show that your company is actually taking cybersecurity seriously. It's not quite as draconian as the ISO 27001, but nonetheless, it shows to you, your customers, your clients, that actually you've taken you've taken your obligations around cybersecurity seriously. And obviously, if you get a credit in that way, you can carry that Cyber Essentials logo on your websites and your documentation, that sort of thing. There are a couple of other resources that I'll just whiz through very quickly. This is all material on the NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Centre, that you might want to have a look at. They have a ton of stuff that you can use, and we've only really touched on the very basics of business-related cybersecurity. There are entire sections on this website for you to have a look at. A small business guide is probably something that you might want to download and have a read of. Board toolkits for those of you who are the directors and managers, some really good stuff for you to start thinking about in terms of board decision making and that sort of thing. There are even some exercises that you can do with your staff on the NCSC website, and these are a couple of exercises based around either discussion or paper feeds or that sort of thing that you might want to have a look at. It's some of it's quite fun, but there is a serious side to it, and actually it's a really good training method for your staff as well. So things to think about. Small Business Response and Recovery Guide, another really good document in the unfortunate event that you should get attacked by a cyber attack. It's worth just mentioning that actually for small and medium businesses in the UK, anecdotally I'm being told that 50% of them, if they suffer a data breach, will go bust within 6 months for a variety of different reasons, but those statistics are horrific. So if you can potentially avoid that from happening, it's a really good thing to do. The Cybersecurity Information Sharing Partnership, for those of you who are in IT, it's a really good place to keep up to date with the current stuff that's going on. You can see what's being touted around the business environment. It's run by the NCSC as well. It's just a good place to go to find out what's happening in real time, and you can ask questions, comments, stuff, and that sort of thing. You'll get these slides a little bit later on. And last but not least, the action fraud reporting. I'm sure most of you will have come across it before. There has been an element of negative publicity around it, but they are dealing with a significant volume of crime, and generally they do a really good job around it. And the important thing for businesses is obviously that 24/7 live cyber line. It's not there to tell you that they're actually going to fix all your woes at the time, but what you can do is you can expect to get an element of support about what you might be experiencing in terms of a live cyber attack. It's worth just keeping that number in your diaries for future reference. And you'll be very pleased to know that that's enough of me talking. That is the link for the survey. If any of you use the QR camera thingies on your phones, I'd be really grateful if you could fill that in. It's a very simple 1 or 2 page anonymous feedback form. But that's a kind of introduction to some of the cybersecurity advice we provide for business, and I am more than happy to answer any questions that people may have about the stuff that I've waffled on for the last hour.
Thank you very much, Neil. I think that gives us all many things to think about and go and have a look at. So does anybody have any questions? If you wanted to pop them in the questions box, we can refer to them now and I'll put them to Neil. If there aren't any that come through, then we will share the slides with you and the link to the survey. And just thank you to Neil for his time and sharing all that knowledge with us. Any question from Vicky? Is Zoom the best platform for business meetings?
It's difficult to say what is the best platform, because I think all of them offer different features and that sort of thing. And obviously it also depends on whether or not you've got other software. One thing I would say is that all of these video conferencing systems have functionality and settings that you really need to be aware of before you use it. Now, Zoom has had quite a couple of problems. If anybody's received our latest newsletter, it was dedicated to Zoom and Zoom bombing, which is a new phenomenon where people are managing to get into other people's Zoom meetings and cause a problem with it. Now, a lot of these have actually been caused because the people who are hosting the Zoom meetings or webinars just aren't familiar enough with some of those settings to prevent that from happening. Now, the same thing could probably happen across all of these sort of platforms. I don't know all of them. I haven't used all of them before. But Zoom is a really good platform to use. It's relatively easy. You just need to be aware of what the limitations are with it. If you've got extremely confidential stuff to talk about, you need to make sure that they accommodate it. I think the latest version of Zoom is all TLS, so you know, the transmission and stuff should all be encrypted now. It's just a case of working out which one is good, which one isn't for you. I mean, probably the good thing about Zoom is it comes with a free version as well, doesn't it? So that's pretty useful. But there are others, you know, Microsoft Teams, VNC, TeamViewer. They all do a very similar thing. It's just a case of working out what works best for your business.
Lovely, thank you, Neil. I don't think we've had any, well, there's no other questions that come in, just a few people saying thank you very much, informative and thought-provoking, so I think we've all got a lot to go away and have a look at and see if our emails have been used anywhere. But, other than that,